On this episode, political parties, a thing of the past, judicial system in need of an overhaul, campaign financing, a disease no one wants to touch, and political stew, how to have a political conversation, keeping the laughter. This and more right now.
Exciting times or annoying times ahead, depending on where you sit and how you see things. Contrary to the usual political talk you hear on other channels, we want to take you to people's hearts and their stomachs today. Cooking up a political stew, or better said, a political meal, with real bipartisan food, hopefully some fun, great guests, and a lot of common sense. The whole idea tonight is to have a funny, informative, and hopefully also entertaining evening. So in addition to a healthy discussion across party lines, with all the serious that's going on, we decided to take a more lighthearted approach and bring some juicy talk along with a juicy dinner idea right into your home. And in the process, dive deeper into what's happening in our everyday life here in America. What Americans really think, what they want, and how we all actually do see the future and want to live. You're welcome to join the discussion. As always, thanks for joining us. I'm Nicolette. Right ahead, red, white, and blue stuffed chard with tariff rice and a colorful American dessert. So, if you always wondered how to do a dinner party and talk politics, maybe you get some inspirations tonight. And to start off, a snapshot of what most of us are actually thinking about a lot of the topics at hand. Two-party system. Good, bad, or done?
Bad.
Done.
Good.
Insults our intelligence.
Necessary.
What do you think of the judicial system currently?
I believe the Supreme Court has yeoman's work to do, and so I'm looking forward to some positive results from their decisions.
Keep American as free as it is. I think it's working.
Too political.
I think it needs an overhaul.
And I think they need to look at longevity on those
Okay.
within that system.
Fourth branch of government, if you think of FBI, CIA, what do you think?
Trust issues.
Gosh, I don't know.
That's fine. You don't
Yeah,
know.
pass.
That's fine.
Trust, I will say, but not the issues. It's the safety.
Definitely a conflict of interest, and not when we come to our three branches of government, I would never include FBI or CIA.
Well, that's what's called the fourth branch of government, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, so last question. If you could toss something in the cooking pot tonight, out of all, what's currently going on, what would it be? One item.
Steak.
Well, I mean, in the political system.
And
Unless you want to make everything into a steak.
No. So with a great meal, I would actually bring in more women into our government.
Okay. Not to cook us, right?
No, definitely not.
Okay.
Immigration.
Okay.
Honesty.
There you go.
More egalitarians.
Will, if you wanted to add something to the stew in the cook pot tonight, what would you toss in?
Some integrity.
That brings me right back to a video we did back in 2021 about where we are today. Watch. Change is everywhere. There's hardly a person on the planet who hasn't been pushed out of their comfort zone by now. Where do we go? What matters to us? How do we want to live, work, or do business in this emerging new world? Who are we? And more importantly, who can we become? Humanity is at a pivot point. Business, politics, and society used to be business as usual. No more. It's dead. In a world where everything is connected, where change can happen in the blink of an eye, where machines are becoming thinkers, there is one differentiator. You're the central point of a raging tornado of change, a storm fueled by digitization, automation, artificial intelligence, and unprecedented developments that have dissolved boundaries already. a storm that's also raging in us, driving an inner urge for more meaning and purpose. 2020, it's the year we became dual citizens, living in the virtual world and simultaneously in the real world. COVID, one of so many challenges, making us hit the reset button. The once unthinkable, now thinkable. So what's our response? Our world of work has shifted forever. The skills we need are radically different. Our systems are coming to the brink of their ability to function. Human traits such as creativity, imagination, compassion, discernment are more important than ever. Are our structures, ecosystems, and how we think ready for the future? And where are you in all of this, when every level of our lives is being transformed, from economics to human engagement, from social interaction to social empathy? How do we open our minds to places we've never been before, move beyond data to wisdom, from chaos to stability? What's the future you want to see? With me here in the studio is Catherine S. Reed. She's mayor of Fairfax City in Virginia, a colleague, host of several television programs such as Inside Scoop and You Need to Know, as well as Making Change Radio. Joining us also is the vice chair of the GOP Fairfax, SrilekhaPalle, and Reverend Steve Miller, Ashoka Fellow and CEO of the United States Christian Leadership Organization, an organization that focuses on leadership among religious institutions with a very strong presence in the southern states. Steve is also former chief of staff with Beto O'Rourke. If you think of the two candidates, is this really the best we can come up with?
No, it's not. And I think part of it is the two-party system. And I think we have to acknowledge the fact that the two-party system, although it has been around really since the founding of the country, it has not consistently produced the results that Americans want. And there's a lot of reasons for that, but the fact that there's so much money in politics right now, the fact that we have districts that have been gerrymandered, gerrymandering is a huge problem. We just did redistricting here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. These things have impacted what candidates we've ended up with. And so I think the two-party system has not served us well, is not serving us well.
I think, Nicolette, the right question would be, this is what we have right now, right? I think this is where we take it from here and do the best with what we have, whether we agree or not. This is where we are landing up. Going back to the two-party system, again, I'm an immigrant, so I have a lot more understanding about South Asian geopolitics than hopefully some of you at least. And I feel like two parties, I mean, there are pros and cons for a two-party system, but I think two-party system still is the foundation of America, and I always say there's a very good reason America is still considered to be the best in the world, and not just because of two-party system, but I think when you have multiple parties, voters split, and then you end up kind of not really knowing who your best candidates are. So I think going back to your first question now, even in this two-party system, I think you can have relevant candidates, stronger candidates by having strong foundational principles in the party itself versus thinking about expanding more and more parties. In other countries I've seen where you can have different regional parties within the states, and states rule themselves, and then there is federal system where you have two majority parties. I think we can look at all structures, but I always go back to the founding principles and say there's a very good reason America is the best country in the world.
Oh, it is, but that does not mean the two-party system, because the two-party system isn't part of the actual Constitution.
It isn't. It just evolved.
It was done afterwards, exactly.
It evolved.
So we could do without parties, actually.
We could. I mean, I think now we have no labels.
It would be difficult. It would be difficult. But I think if you look at open primaries, which is a movement, and ranked choice voting, which is also a movement, that does offer something different. I mean, it doesn't eliminate parties, but it eliminates the process by which you take, for instance, 13 candidates that are running in the 10th congressional district, and you figure out how you take 13 candidates who all want to be a Democratic nominee and pick the best of the 13. Because doing it as a primary, you could end up with somebody winning with 12% of the vote, right? So open primaries, ranked choice voting, that is something that is new. And it's not instead of a two-party system, it is a different process.
Steve, I'm going to pull you in on this one because I know we had lots of conversations on this.
I mean, we have a lot of people. I mean, right before the show started, I heard somebody mention Jamie Dimon. I mean, someone like Jamie Dimon, people who have really done something within their lives extraordinary over a long period of time, are people that are the people that should be running for these offices, but they don't even get into the races. But because they understand that when you get into these races, you know, you have the media influence coming in, they come in and they drag your life, your personal life through mud. The best of us are not even exposing themselves to the political system. And to go back to political parties, George Washington warned us about political parties at the very beginning. He admonished the country, don't devolve into political parties. And we did. And we were disobedient. And this is the result of that disobedience. And then if you go back way into antiquity, you know, democracy means power to the people. And originally, political parties didn't exist. You just came to a central voting area, a town hall, and you voted. But if you do your studying of history, you will begin to learn that political parties evolved specifically to take the power away from the people, to take it out of the hands of the people, which is not very democratic at all. It's representative, but it is not democratic.
Interesting. Shifting gear here for a second, there were a lot of court rulings last week. We all heard about that. Are those game changers? And if those are not, what would you expect as sort of going forward could be potential game changers from now till November?
Well, I think the judicial system, and I know you asked earlier what people thought about the judicial system, and we always had thought of the Supreme Court as being the ultimate backstop, the final arbitration. And I think we've lost confidence in that. I mean, I would just put Roe v. Wade out there. It was a settled piece of, you know, the case had been heard and it was decided 50 years ago, but now it's been redecided. Well, if everything can be redecided, then is it a matter of a country of laws, or does it matter who's sitting on the court to decide what those laws actually mean on any given year? I think the country is losing confidence in our ability for the judicial system to make decisions that hew closely to what the law actually is.
But I do worry about judicial system kind of losing its way. I think not only now, but I think I've kind of thought of it for the past several years at this point. And also I think it just doesn't sit well with me that any president could come in regardless of the party structure and could change the entire judicial nomination process, or people that are sitting in it. Just doesn't sit well with me. Another thing that really doesn't I can't fathom is that it is a lifetime appointment. I think that more than anything, I think that just doesn't, I just don't think that is fair to American people in general. I just don't think it should be a lifetime appointment. Like any other office, it should be there should be some kind of term limit. Obviously, it can be every 2 years because there is a very good reason why it has been a lifetime appointment. But I think that would really put them at a point where they feel like this has to be an impartial system, because presidents come and go, but judicial system has to continue to maintain their integrity.
That's interesting, because I'm an immigrant too, and I have a very similar reaction to that. I'm like, so why aren't we having term limits for the judicial limits, and not even just have where you have judges that can be just appointed, but isn't there also something to actually have, in this case, career judges that actually have been progressed up?
And if I may add to that, one thing that I feel is when we are evolving so fast with regards to AI, with all the changes, we're talking about third-party system and so on and so forth, where we want to look for opportunities for younger people. We want more of this kind of, having that Supreme Court not having term limit just does not sit. I feel like it doesn't give opportunities for much deserving people to be on those seats. So I think it's kind of high time we rethink of that process and see how else we can make some term limits on it so more people get opportunities that are very well capable to be on those seats.
Good idea. Steve, your take on this one?
I think the Supreme Court weighing in, and they could have decided this way back in December, that they decided not to. Now this case is going to be kicked further and further down the road. the former president may not even face justice. I think the Supreme Court, I think term limits are definitely in order. You have a process that's called senatorial courtesy, when the president has to have the approval of a senator from a particular state in order to serve in the judiciary. I think that's wrong. We get most of our candidates from Harvard and Yale. It's not very diverse. Only two universities, only two modes of thought, or one mode of thought is shaping our policy for everyone in America. I think the whole judicial system needs to be overhauled. In order to do that, we're going to have to truly give power back to the people and take it out of the hands of the special interests.
That's a tough one, because where would you start? Which actually brings me to the next question. When we look at this election, what's actually at stake? When you really look underneath, what are people fighting about from your perspective? And are they really fighting about a different worldview or a different way of life, or is everything just based on pure raw emotion and the new modus operandi, which means you just oppose whatever the other one says?
So I believe, Nicolette, I think you're trying to understand if Americans are just opposing each other because they belong to different political.
Do we actually know? Do we actually know what is at stake? Do people actually know what they're fighting about at this point? Is there really a different worldview, a different way of life, a different something, or have we just become so into this new modus operandi of simply opposing to oppose, because this has been really day in and day out in the last 10 years or 5 years, maybe not 10 years, but 5 years.
Yeah, I have an idea on that. I think for the most part, people are beginning to really toe the party line. Whatever the party line is, without thinking, they accept it, hook, line, and sinker. So the party can actually force upon people things that they don't even like, and people will go along with it just because it's our party. You know, it's politics has devolved into a game, right? As long as the person is on our team, no matter what they say or do, we're going to support it. And I think that's dangerous. There's no thought put into this, very little, I should say, thought put into political policies. There's very little thought put into how people actually think about things. They just accept them because a person on their team has proposed it. And I think that's very, very dangerous.
Would you agree with that?
So I have a slightly different take. I think I would say less agree or disagree, slightly different take. I honestly think majority of Americans are on the same page. I think they're fighting because they feel like America is losing its grip over the culture and so on and so forth, right? Like myself and Catherine, we belong to two different aisles, but when we were talking, it just felt like she was my colleague talking. So I think it is not even the minority of the population, it is the fringe of the minority are the ones that are creating the chaos, right? So if you actually take them out of the equation, I think majority of us really feel like America is going down. It is less prosperous right now. Inflation is high. The immigration of illegal aliens is just coming across. Our girls are not safe. The drugs and fentanyl is high in schools. The parental rights are at risk. I think that most of us believe in the same thing. Whenever I travel outside of the country, I'm like, oh my gosh, in 20 years, India has developed a 9.5%, and America has GDP has gone up only 2%. That worries me because my kids are going to be.
Yeah, but we also had like more years to build up to that. So you know, you got the cyclical thing.
Sure, we do. But on the same token, I feel as much as I would like the entire world to grow because I'm a humanist and I really, because that's my homeland, but you still care for the country that you live in, and you want the economy to grow as prosperously as other countries are growing, right? So if you go around and come back and you're like, we all are fighting for the same thing, I think our approach is very different. And like what Steve was saying, the approach is being dictated by the political parties. The approach are dictated by the mainstream media, whether it be Fox News or whether it's CNN, MSNBC, See, they dictate. But I think political figures, the minority leader, majority leader in Senate and House, they are the ones that are kind of dictating the narrative, which is, I think, is sad. But I think majority of Americans, we're all on the same page. We want safe communities, prosperous. We want best for the children. We want to grow our economy. We just want to continue to live great American lives.
So I think we've become very tribal. So what we believe has to do with our echo chamber.
Yes.
Whatever echo chamber we're in, we surround ourselves with people who just validate what we believe. And if you never step outside your echo chamber, if you listen, if you watch MSNBC or you watch Fox or whatever, that you're going to get these messages that consistently feed you the way, and you're surrounded by people who believe the same thing. You know, I think that we are in a place right now where it's choose your own reality and pick your own facts. And in local government, I see this in front of me in city council meetings. People come in and it's like, but I believe that this is true. And it doesn't matter if you counter with other facts. They've already picked their facts. And nothing you say is going to change their minds. And the example I continue to use is that millions of people believe the 2020 election was stolen. Millions of people believe the election was stolen. Nothing we are going to say to the people who believe that will ever change their minds. But I agree that what most Americans want is just to have healthy communities, good schools, good jobs, to be safe, right? That's what we all want. But we are approaching it from this tribal perspective of this path, this party, these ideas are the only way we can achieve this. And it's not true.
Yeah, and I think that's also, of course, very much fueled by AI, because when you look at, and algorithm in general, when you look at algorithms, you always, when you look at what you watch and they peddle out the stuff that you've been watching, you really think like you're alone in your universe. This is the only thing that's out there. And you develop this almost depressive state when you really go into it, because you think like there is no tomorrow when we actually could create it. But it's because we're all so trapped in that, right? Absolutely. Steve, you look very pensive there.
I was just thinking, you know, yeah, we all want the same thing, right? But in order for us to get those things, people have to be elected to these offices. And in order for people to win, they have to create some type of division in order to win. We all know that negative advertising works. So in order for people to occupy these places of power and these positions of power, they use negativity in order to win. And we get sucked into that negativity, and all of a sudden it becomes a football game. And I'm against you, you're against me. We don't want the same thing, because our politicians are driving what we should think and how we should think, right? And they do that in a negative way, and we get sucked in. And I don't know why we get sucked into that, but we do. Negativity sells, and we get lumped into it.
Yeah, that's a good point, but I do think that's really up to the people. And I will say we blame so often the political leaders on the negativity and the media and the money and all this stuff, but at the end of the day, who's in charge? Why do they sell the stuff they sell? Because people are sucking for it and they go for it. That's why. So who actually has the work to do? It's us, it's people.
Right. It's us.
And we have to own it at some point. I think this is really the part that kind of, it's so easy to just say and yell, oh, you did this and you did this and you did this. How about some self-responsibility with all of this? We're kind of, you know, falling a little short on that part.
You're right.
I have one more question, and then I want to take a break and actually start cooking. When you look at the different worldviews, though, is there really, you both said, actually all three of you said we all want to do the same thing, but there must be some differences. So there must be a different worldview in terms of large government, small government, for example. Is it more up to the people, the self? You create something out of yourself, which I think is the closest to what the American Constitution was founded on, or do we have the government hand it out? So I guess what I'm getting is this, have we come to a point where there's also the question of lifestyle, rural area versus urban area, because we live so radically different lives?
Definitely true. I mean, you just have to look at the political map to understand that people who live in urban cities tend to be Democrats and liberal, and people who live in more rural places tend to be more conservative however they see conservative and belong to the Republican Party. But again, I think it's because we've all become tribal. And it's like you have to pick one. And this is the problem with the two-party system. You know, and there's a lot of people who will say, well, my party has left me. In other words, if you're not a Trump supporter, are you still a Republican? Are you? I don't know. But there's a lot of people who are not Trump supporters who think they're Republicans. Liz Cheney is a perfect example. She spoke recently at the Richmond Forum. You know, Liz Cheney is a Republican and she was kicked out of her party. And yet she says things that people across America of all political think has merit. People are willing to listen to what she has to say. But does she have a party? She doesn't.
Okay, I'm going to have to give this one to you because you're a GOP.
Since Catherine kind of brought up the candidate's name, I want to kind of give obviously a couple of examples. Going back to what Steve also said, how could we not have great candidates? At least in Republican, we had about 6 or 8 candidates running. In Democrat Party, we had Joe Biden and who else running? The second thing is, I was a Democrat long time back, and your argument of like party seriously left me with their fringe policies. I didn't leave the party. I'm still the same. I love to work with people. I collaborate. I have a very global view. I'm definitely not a socialist or Marxist by any means. I believe in small government. I believe in parental rights. I feel like I take accountability. I want to take responsibility. I'm very fiscally responsible. But that used to be Democrat Party. If you think about it, about 20 years back, they were very focused on all of that. So the party has left me. But I'll leave you with another one, Tulsi Gabbard. Since you took Liz Cheney, let me take Tulsi Gabbard. Tulsi Gabbard was a great Democrat. She was a Marine. She did everything right, but her party deceived her based on her, because she's open, she believes in freedom of speech, and she belongs to a different religion, and so on and so forth. So I think we can go back and forth when we are picking these candidates and stuff. But I think bottom line, Nicolette, going back to your party, yes, we definitely have a different worldview, I think, and that's why I think it has become so polarized. Republicans are still very focused on small government, fiscal responsibility, faith, family, freedom, whereas I believe, I don't want to speak for Democrats, I think they are definitely kind of focused on more of a global issues versus national domestic issues. Sometimes I think there is an old saying that my grandma used to say, set your home straight first before you look at everything else, because if your home has a great foundation, you do great at home, then you can conquer the world. But our home is not stable right now, so let's fix our home before we worry about the entire. That doesn't mean that I'm negating the wars. I'm not negating our presence, but I'm just saying let us get our foundation straight, and then let's move back to the global issues.
On that note, and Steve, I don't want to cut you short, but I want to get the cooking started here, because the home. Speaking of home, we want to go a little bit to the stomach as well. Glenn Moore, television producer turned chef. That's quite.
Yeah, I had to do something during COVID.
That's
during
funny.
COVID, not
Yes,
necessarily
it is
television producing, but event producing live events.
Yes.
And live events pretty much went away at a drop of a hat when they pulled the plug on travel and events. What is your earliest political memory? I got mine already.
My earliest is 1968. I grew up during segregation. I was in an all-white school in the 3rd grade, and that was the year Martin Luther King got killed.
My first memory was Jimmy Carter running for president, and he had a daughter, and I just thought that was the coolest thing, to be the daughter of the president.
And a bag of peanuts.
Yeah.
You remember that? And now we're showing our age.
Here or back home?
Either or. International.
Because back home, of course, will be Balaguer, which was the president that ran for so many years in the Dominican Republic. But I remember Bush, father, talking about it, and that's, if I come here, that's the memories I have.
Were you ever small enough to have an early memory?
I have an early memory, but so with that, I remember Jimmy Carter and driving in the car and sitting in a long line to get gasoline. And that's when he first explained to me about inflation and why the lines were so long. And I remember that being during Jimmy Carter's presidency.
Totally. Yeah, I remember that too.
Do you really? Okay.
I mean, I'm not going to age myself.
And they had those Coca-Cola commercials
No, I don't remember that.
during the time where you couldn't get gas.
Well, food brings back a lot of memories. It does for me. It usually does for many people. Even the smells of it, what your parents cooked, wherever you grew up, brings up memories. My earliest political memory was Nixon resigning, and I have it on cassette tape if you want to hear his favorite food. It's in my car because he recorded it.
Okay.
That's a joke. That's his.
Sorry.
Nixon was recording everyone, remember?
Okay.
Watergate.
Watergate.
Oh, jeez. I knew I shouldn't have opened with that. That was a big mistake. Well, there's no punchline in dry humor. There's no punchline in dry humor. You want to go in the other room? Look what they're talking about.
The two-party system, I know with her in her studio now. So just the thought of that, I had mentioned earlier that I thought that was insulting our intelligence. I think we're too complex, too diverse a nation that we're only defined at this point by two parties. Right. And most often people don't recall that Abraham Lincoln was voted into office and he had less than 50% of the vote. It was around 40%. And there were four parties. There were four viable parties at that time.
Right.
So right now, we are dominated by two parties, and I don't think that's healthy for us as a nation.
Absolutely.
And it's kind of strange because, I don't know about the DR, but I've traveled to Latin Americas, and they've got like 8 parties, and they have so many parties, the green, the red, the blue.
Right.
The purple.
They have to color scheme them. And here we are.
Right now, Dominican Republic's party is a fourth party. That one, the president that we have right now, that the Dominican Republic has. So I think it's important to have more than 2 that have the freedom, because why we have the president coming from a fourth party? Because they really were tired of the main 2. Right. So what they came is they support him to the point that he won. So that's what you have when you have options. But when you are so limited, you have to go to 2 mindsets.
Right.
So if you don't dive to the right or to the left, you just either don't vote or just have to keep yourself silent.
The lesser of 2 evils.
Well, how did we evolve in this country to being so polarized with this?
Well, I think it started with those 2 parties, man, were rooted parties. So you look at the world today, generation-wise. The new generation are not down with the 2 parties. They're really not.
Well, look at the money. So what do you think about multi-parties? We have a blue, a red, a gray, a pink, a white party.
I've always been surprised all my life. Why are there only 2 parties? And then there's the independent one, but that one just gets shuffled off to the side. So
very early, right?
Yeah, very early.
Yeah, I mean, we had that green.
Well,
he pulled out that chicken foot pointer.
something that sabotaged his
It only takes one thing, but it's not one thing. You're about to chime in.
So when we talk about parties, and she's right, the independent, but party that I'm be rooting for and fighting for is called egalitarian, and that covers everything. What an egalitarian is someone that represents equality and justice for all. That's my big thing.
Are you worried that it might be too utopian, that you're aiming toward perfection, which doesn't exist, or does?
Well, give us a point of reference of a politician who's egalitarian.
Obama.
Obama is an egalitarian?
To me, in my mind, he represented equality.
Okay.
He represented justice for all.
Okay. Even though he won as a Democrat.
We're going to do a red, white, and blue chard roll. We're going to stuff it after I clean it. Not that one. We're going to stuff it with sausage and garlic, and we're going to roll it, much like you see grape leaves and other leaves. And then we're going to go to a 2-party salad. That I'm going to use some new green deal lettuce, candidates and such, candidates, some Geo peaches, things like that, some cranberries, Then we also have a red, white, and blue, a red and blue Jello balls. But just to bring those together, I wanted to bring like a whip, into the situation. A party whipped cream. It's probably the toughest job on the hill. I was gonna have more ingredients, but I mean, you wouldn't believe when you go to the farmer's market, the Pentagon Farmers Market, this costs $549 at the Pentagon Farmers Market. So I had to kind of trim down on things. This is the GeoPeach. Oh man, he's fighting. He's alone and he's fighting with himself. So there's things like that I'm trying to do.
Okay.
And once I clear everybody out of my kitchen.
Oh, so you want us to leave?
Eventually, yeah. Chef doesn't want people reading over their shoulders,
right.
bending over and picking up the dropped shard. And everybody remembers, the hanging shard, right? If you don't have a memory of the hanging shard, that's something to remember. I was going to make Mitch cannolis and stuff them instead of these leaves, but it's just flip-flops around too much, so I can't make Mitch cannolis. And then I was going to do it with a Nancy Pelosi stock, but it's just too rich, it's just the stock is too rich now. So I had ideas. I had bigger ideas before I came to this show.
Good.
Crushed garlic. If you would just add a little salt to the bottom of your tray and press on the garlic cubes, you're going to make your own paste very quickly.
That looks very much like the election process in the United States, where everybody crushes everyone.
Right. Right. I think if you walk around Capitol Hill, you're going to smell a lot of garlic breath.
Cannoli? Okay, sorry about
Yeah, he's really very funny. The hanging shard. I thought that was clever.
That was funny.
Hanging shard. Yep.
It is unscripted, by the way, guys. Just so you know.
He's good.
Completely unscripted.
He's good. I like him.
So when you look at the political process right now, what do you think are some of the real big issues why you think it's really not democracy?
Well, it's really not. It's really about powerful people staying in power. Our judiciary is supposed to protect the minority. It's supposed to be fair at all times, right? So if you have a district that you could draw that's 70% Democratic, 30% Republican, how is that fair to the people in that district? All districts should be drawn 50-50. And if they're 50-50, those politicians now have to come up with ideas in order to win. I'll give you a prime example here. In Texas, right? I think there needs to be a such thing as open primaries. I believe Louisiana has an open primary. And there are two candidates that I want to vote for. There's a candidate that I want to vote for that's a Democrat at the Senate level, U.S. Senate level. There's a candidate that I want to vote for that's a Republican at the state representative level. And both of those particular candidates embody what I want and what I need, what I think is right. But yet I can't vote for both of them. I have to vote for a Democrat or I have to vote for a Republican in those primaries. Why can't everybody be on the same ballot where I can have true access to any candidate or any person? It shouldn't be about a party. It should be about a person. So people create these parties, they create these lines to give their particular idea an unfair advantage so they can stay in power. This is not about the people. This is not about power to the people, which is what democracy means. This is about power to those empowered.
I think I have to agree with some of the things that Steve said, but the thing I'll also go back to what Nicolette said, taking accountability about people, right? The reason all this have happened is because people are not taking the time to understand who is on the ballot, right? If for democracy to work properly, everyone should be informed, everyone should feel accountable, everyone should go out to vote, everybody should understand who is on the ballot, everyone should do the right things at the right time, which you and I know is not happening and will never happen. And that's precisely why we have all of these policies. And I know I ran as Board of Supervisor, and I was totally dismissed, even though it is a bipartisan and non-partisan, in fact, but I was totally dismissed as a candidate just because they all knew I was a Republican. I think that is an unfair process.
Okay,
crazy.
wait a minute.
That's
Do you
stupid.
actually were you actually dismissed? Are you presuming that was the case? They knew you're Republican.
They were.
and you were
I
dismissed,
mean,
or was
I
that
know
an actual reason?
that. I mean,
That's the
anecdotally,
case.
I could see that 60% of the people would come in and would not give me a chance, and they would ask for a Democrat ballot. I mean, they would really not even look at me and say, as soon as they come to know that I was that is happening here, but that could happen in other places for Democrat candidates too. I'm not saying I'm not going to play a victim and say it only happened because I'm a Republican. Maybe if you go to some other state where Republicans are dominant, maybe they wouldn't even give a chance to a reasonable Democrat candidate, right? They wouldn't even touch my ballot, most of the people. And that's precisely I'm saying, like going back to your point, at a certain point, we as voters, and that's when I go to my immigrant communities, my sisters and brothers in my South Asian community, I say, you have to take accountability in coming out and getting to know the candidates. Then I think what Steve is saying works perfectly.
I actually think immigrants have an advantage over this, and you know why? Because we don't know the system yet, so I think you're generally more open and not quite so brainwashed, if I call it, or dipped into your roots. We're not quite so tribal, because when we come here as immigrants, you're kind of out of your roots, right? You're away from it, so you're more open to maybe listen and see, wait a minute here, so what is this actually? What is that? And it doesn't make sense. So I think maybe that's why really we do need, like, immigrants have a different perspective on that very often.
Very different. And I think that's
You
when
know,
Democrats.
I'd like to say something real quick. You know, even if we took all the responsibilities in the world and got a chance to know each of our candidates and studied each of their policies and positions very thoroughly, you're still herded into one way or another to vote. You don't really have freedom to vote for the people that you want to, because you have to choose Republican and Democrat, especially in the primary. There's no way, there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to vote for everybody on that particular ballot instead of having to choose a party. We're limited. The people in power are giving us limitations to who we can choose right off the bat. And then on top of that, if you want to run as the third party, it is almost impossible to get on the ballot. The Democrats and Republicans have designed it so it's nearly impossible for anybody else other than themselves to get on the ballot.
What about in local politics?
You know,
Same thing.
So it is, but in municipal or local elections, what it comes down to is voter turnout. So I will say that in the Commonwealth of Virginia, we had May elections, which was a holdover from the Byrd machine. And so I can speak for Fairfax City. We had, for 60 years, we had 20% or less of registered voters voting in the city of Fairfax. Then the General Assembly changed it so all of the municipal elections had to be held in November. So our first election in the city of Fairfax in November was November of 2022. 59% of registered voters voted. That's 3 times the number of voters who'd been voting every other year for the past 60 years. The thing about the 20% that voted is that they kept the same people on the dais. In other words, when you only got 20% of the people coming out, and they have decided, it kind of ran like a board of directors, right? People stayed in office until they died, or they retired, or they resigned. But when you had 3 times as many people voting, even though there were ayes next to everybody's name, because in the Commonwealth of Virginia, these are nonpartisan elections. When you go in there, there is no R's and no D's next to anybody's name. It's all I. But the fact of the matter is, the only reason I'm the first woman mayor is because a different electorate showed up.
That's good.
right?
And that actually brings up another question, because also so the whole voting pool, the demographics have changed significantly, right? So you have a lot more African American voters, you have a lot more Asian voters. It's the fastest growing eligible voter group is actually in Asian Americans.
Correct.
So it changes significantly in terms of what people look for. When you look at different demographics, you look at the system, you look at a couple of those thresholds, like we still grapple with the two-party system, etc. But the one thing no one ever wants to touch is the campaign financing, which is the bedrock of why we have the power where it is right now.
There's too much money in politics. You know, they've said before that electeds should have like NASCAR patches saying, you know, who their contributors were, which industries invested in their campaigns,
right.
Because this is money buys influence. I'm sorry, it does.
Yeah.
And in other countries, you don't have the enormous amounts of money that are going into political campaigns. And I wish we had publicly financed campaigns in the United States. I wish there were lots of limits.
We do, yes.
Yeah,
yes.
I wish we had these limits, because then it would really come more to the merit of the candidates. If everybody had the same money to spend, it would come down to the merit of the candidates.
And more people would run.
And more people would run, because that's very much an issue.
Yeah.
Who thinks they can raise the necessary money to run in these races?
Yeah, if you have to come up with
Absolutely.
billions just to get an advertising for it, this is absolutely insane. Which brings one very big issue up, and that's big tech. How is big tech involved, and why is big tech so much actually in line with the Democrats? Who wants to take that, Steve or you?
Steve can take that.
You know, I'm not as well versed on this particular issue, so I'm going to pass on this one and let someone else take it.
So you're saying that big tech really is something that is in the Democratic purview?
More actually. So they're more in the Democrat field than they're on the Republican. So I personally know this also from people.
It doesn't feel this. I can tell you, it doesn't feel that way.
Well,
it doesn't feel that way.
But it does. If you actually look at where Google goes and where Facebook goes and where all the big tech firms go, that all goes in the Democratic pocket. I think that's fair to say that. I also know that there are a lot of people who are actually working in these organizations have been very concerned about that very matter. And what they had explained to me, and I want to hear both of what you think about this, is that what happened is that before, the Democrats, like a while back, were usually the party who would break up big conglomerates, like big companies. You know, the monopolies, they would set up and they would say, yes, you need to do this. But ever since big tech came on and they become so big donors to the Democrat Party, the Democrats no longer do what they used to do in terms of breaking up those big companies, so nobody does it.
That's true, monopolies are a problem.
I mean, I think big techs are definitely, I think you're 100% right on it, or more than 100% right. I think they're all run by globalists. I think that, and globalists invest, the only way they can make money and make this billions of dollars and have their stocks raise up in Wall Street is by investing in global, not exactly just in America. So their market is not just American people. Their market is Chinese, their market is Indians, their market is South. So I think they have that synergy going on, like all the liberals and Democrats are mostly globalists. They feel like they're doing this virtue signaling of taking care of the entire world, but in the same token, they're making billions of dollars by investing in other things. So, and the same thing with regards to big tech. I mean, that's how they make their money. So it just makes sense that they are synergized, because if they donate to Republicans, where Republicans are talking about small government and they're trying to control the funds. I mean, that's one of the reasons why Fairfax County continues to turn blue, is because of federal dollars. I think most of our workforce is dependent on big government funding. So one of the reasons we can never turn red is because here we are, Republican message can talk all they want about faith, family, freedom, parental rights, and all kinds of small government, but at the end of the day, if there is no big government, all the federal jobs will be at risk. So they would continue to want to go and vote for Jerry Connolly that supports those federal dollars. Same thing with big government is synergy with globalists, and that's where I think that huge donor fund is going back and forth.
Fairfax County, you're going to have to reply.
Well, no. Go ahead, Steve.
You want to jump
I was thinking, we're thinking about big tech. I mean, you got big oil, you got the NRA. I mean, you have all of these special interest groups. But I think what we've all discovered here today as we have this conversation is that our democratic society is not very democratic. And for us to be talking about big tech is further proof that our democratic society is not very democratic. I mean, if we had public financing of campaigns, if we had a dissolution of political parties and people just ran on ideas, I think we could solve all of the problems that we needed to solve and stay unified as a country at the same time.
But wouldn't that be something that you'd say that 80% of Americans probably would be united in? So why isn't it happening?
I think Gen Z, and I might not be alive to see what they do, but Gen Z grew up in a very different country than what we experience. And, I have a 21-year-old city council member that I work with on my dais. And he's a student at George Mason University, and he's terrific, and he's very serious, and he does a great job as a city council member. But, he grew up in a time where he experienced active shooter drills in kindergarten. Mm-hmm. Like I didn't. He grew up as a digital native, right? With social media and email and cell phones. I didn't. Neither did my children who are in their 30s. Gen Z has a very different perspective on what they think this country is and what they think it should be and could be. And I think what we're going to, I'm a boomer. We are clogging up the system. We are. We just refuse to retire. We refuse to get out of the way. We still want to be relevant. And we are not letting Gen X, we are not letting the millennials, we are not letting Gen Zers step up to try to change some of the things that were built by boomers. And these are things that need to be fixed.
I mean, I think we all have some different viewpoint, right? I don't think boomers are clogging the system. I think I'm a very traditionalist where I believe that there is so much to learn from boomers. So them being in the system, I had so much value to Gen Zs, and it's just a matter of them acknowledging that. And I think you're right. You said they're very smart, and smart Gen Zs recognize that. In fact, yesterday my son came from UMD, and we both were driving from Uncle Julio's, and we were talking about the strong family units and how prosperous the wealth can be transferable if you have healthy families, strong family units, right? So that's why, I think there is so much Gen Zs can learn. But I think what you said about Gen Zs, yes, they are digital nomads, they are digital natives, they grew up in different worlds, but I think school education has really not done a great job overall about teaching them the history, the real history. We talked about it, teaching them African American history, teaching them Asian American history, teaching them about our founding fathers, teaching them about Constitution. When you're talking about history, if they had that strong founding principles, I think they will realize that the value boomers bring. They will realize why Constitution was written the way that it was written. I think we can bridge both of them, and nobody needs to be clogging the system. Nobody needs to be clamoring to get in somewhere. I think we can still have a great synergy between them.
Actually, that's an interesting point, because I was gonna say something to the Gen Z too. I do not have that much confidence that the Gen Z actually know which kind of country they want. If you speak to them, and please, our audience, if you're listening in and you're a Gen Z, please let us know, share your views, because if you do have a clear idea in what you want and how you want to live, we definitely would want to hear about this. But generally, many of them have not, and many of them don't even know really what the continent is, what they live on, and what they do. How can they know how they want to live if they really are lacking the basics? So I would agree with the education system. For me, that's the one that has to go on the chopper block first.
Yeah.
It's the education system.
And I think it's very important to understand what communism can do, what socialism can do, what Marxism can do.
Well, they all went bankrupt.
They all went bankrupt. Why American exceptionalism is actually called American exceptionalism. Why, in spite of us having such rich dialogue and rich fighting, there are illegal immigrants that are clamoring to come come into this great country. I think it's very important that they don't sit in the classroom playing a victim role and trying to kind of beat over America. It's and I don't think they are, because I have a 21-year-old son. I think he's extremely proud. We all just have to feel accountable in raising that patriotism, trying to raise the bar to them and say, it's great that you guys know AI. It's great that you're on ChatGPT. It's great that you can create these PowerPoint presentations in a 30 seconds, which you and I can do. It's amazing that you have all these tools at your disposal. But on the same token, never forget the traditional values that made us who we are. I think I always say East meets West is what is making immigrants so. I think that's why they're thriving in this country, because they take the great values from the East and merge with the great values of the West. And I think that's what the Gen Zs needs to do.
We're going to go and check out some of this amazing political stew.
Somebody died picking these palms, but it's okay.
All right.
All right, so let's see if this
And on that note, we're going to close out here because we're going to actually go and eat now. So thank you so much, Glenn. We're going to all
you
dive
forgot
in.
one thing.
Oh, what? One more thing?
The hardest job in the house.
Whipped cream.
The hardest job on Capitol Hill is the whip.
The whip.
Oh, the whip. That's right.
We know that.